Hi, everybody, and welcome to my show, the Muller Family 7 show. Today I'm going to be talking about ADHD and specifically about Nehemiah, who is my second oldest. And I have a presentation for you guys that I'm going to be sharing. Go ahead and feel free to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll get started with this video. I'm using StreamYard, and so I have a laptop to the side, so you'll see me going back and forth between the laptop and my phone. So let me see here. And Nehemiah and ADHD and share. All right. And here we go. If anybody is watching, will you please let me know how the sound is and the lighting? Because I can fix a few things if it's not, whoa, not good enough. There we go. All right, so Nehemiah and ADHD. So a little bit about Nehemiah. And this is Nehemiah. This is a picture of Nehemiah. Nehemiah was born October 8, 2007. He was a very difficult baby that cried all the time. I think they would say they were colicky babies. That was Nehemiah. Hours and hours and hours of crying. He was very determined and stubborn. He said his first words at 6 months old, and he was walking by 8 months old. So he was very advanced in his development. But he refused to use words to get his needs and did not talk in full sentences till much later, until 18 months old. And he was into everything all the time. And he had to be watched 24/7. So he was a very active kid, very much so into everything, cried all the time, was hard to please, very stubborn, just a very on-the-go, active, difficult kid. So at the age of 4, Nehemiah was diagnosed with mild autism and ADHD. His diagnosis was later changed to remove the autism. At this young age, he was started on a low dose of Ritalin and Risperdal for violent behavior. He also started speech therapy and ABA therapy. So for those that don't know, Ritalin is a type of stimulant that is used to treat ADHD, and Risperdal was a medication that was used to treat violent behaviors. Speech therapy was to help increase his ability to use speech appropriately and ask for things that he needed. And ABA stands for Applied Behavioral Analysis Therapy, and it's one-on-one intensive therapy, sometimes 2 hours a day, Monday through Friday, where they work on social, emotional, and behavioral goals. So what is ADHD? So ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. There is inattentive type and combined type. A combined type that includes, it says that also includes hyperactivity, which is basically inattentive and hyperactive. Nehemiah is a combined type ADHD, so he's inattentive and hyperactive. ADHD has behaviors that include hyperactivity, inattentiveness, and impulsiveness. That's a big part of ADHD. These range in severity for each person dealing with it, but also includes lack of organizational skills, low self-control, and low executive functioning skills. There's a lot more to ADHD, but this is just a brief overview. For my first video, I will be doing more on ADHD, and I'd like to get a professional on to interview about ADHD that can talk more in a professional manner about what ADHD is and what it encompasses. But this is just a general overview of the signs and symptoms of ADHD. So common behaviors with ADHD is talking very loudly, Never sitting still, fidgeting all the time, speaking out of turn, saying inappropriate comments, talking nonstop, easily being distracted, lacking motivation, aggression is possible, boredom, getting easily excited, hyperactive, impulsive, forgetful, missing details, incomplete tasks, losing items often. So I know that's a long list, and there's probably a lot more that could go on this list. These are just the ones that I could think of. Many kids with ADHD have a hard time maintaining their volume, so they do talk very loudly. Some can talk very quietly, but most of my kids, they talk so loud you think they're screaming at you. Never sitting still is a big one. Like, I'm fidgeting right now, so fidgeting, playing with anything that's around them, tapping a pencil, playing with their hair, all sorts of fidgets. Saying inappropriate comments. Oh, I've had that happen so many times with my kids, but that's just blurting out whatever comes to your mind because you don't have a filter. It just comes right out. That's the impulsivity that's involved in ADHD, talking nonstop, being easily distracted. Just every little thing catches your attention. The common phrase that people like to use is squirrel, very much so for ADHD. A lack of motivation, a lot of times that has to do with just how difficult tasks can be for someone with ADHD because they have to work harder than the average person to maintain focus. So if it's something that requires them to be focused, they're less motivated to do it. Just like you would be less motivated to do something if it was difficult to do. Or you didn't want to do it. That's kind of normal things too. Like, I don't want to do laundry, so I'm not really motivated to do it. But even though it needs to get done, aggression is included with ADHD because there is a lack of impulse control. So you just lash out and respond, and then later think about what you did. Boredom, again. That contributes to the fast moving brain, and it's going constantly nonstop. And so you get bored easily and it's hard to come up with something to do. Easily excited, hyperactive, it goes without saying, impulsive, we've mentioned already, and forgetful. When you're distracted easily and your mind's all over the place, you can forget things, even very important things, even like daily task things, like putting on clean clothes. Missing details. So you're so quick to get through an assignment. Let's say that you miss a negative sign or you miss a positive sign in math, or you miss a word. Instead of saying what is not the way, you might answer what is the way because you missed the not. So missing details is very common. Incomplete tasks, starting something and then not completing it because you got distracted. So you move on to something else. And losing items for the same reason. You just get distracted and forget where you put it, and you can't trace your steps back to find things. So those are some very common ADHD behaviors. What does this look like in real life? Well, this is where we're getting into Nehemiah specifically. At a young age, Nehemiah talked all the time and never sat still, was into everything, and would be aggressive at times. He was so hyper that even to this day, we still have not fully managed his symptoms with medication. He's easily distracted, rarely finishes what he starts, and lashes out in anger before thinking. He interrupts and makes strange noises randomly. He cannot sit still and can be very loud. School is difficult as he struggles to keep up with school and homework. He needs constant reminders and motivators to remain on task. His room is a huge mess. Sorry, Nehemiah, but it is. And he loses and forgets things often. But he is so very smart, and his mind is constantly going and creating new ideas. And I was just talking about Nehemiah today with someone, and I was just talking about how deep his thinking is. Nehemiah has an IQ over 140. He's very, very intelligent. And even in his spare time, he's putting together these intricate things that he likes to build. And even though he may break them after he builds them, he still likes to build things. And he always asks very deep questions. He was reading at a very high level. at a young age. And so, he gets into adult conversations, and I think he enjoys being around adults. And sometimes you forget he's a kid at times because he is so deep in his thinking that he seems like an adult and not a teenager. And he was like that really young too. He would get involved in adult conversation and you forget that he was a kid. So he's very talented and he can pretty much learn anything you teach him. He'll pick it up quickly. The problem is finding things that are interesting to him and that he's going to be motivated to continue doing. Like I did do guitar lessons for a while, and he just didn't have the patience to keep learning. Sorry. And with the not managing his symptoms, Nehemiah is on almost twice the dosage. Let me check something real quick. Okay. Nehemiah is on almost twice the dosage of ADHD meds that an adult would take. So he's taking the highest dose possible of Vyvanse, which is 70 milligrams. And he's also on a good amount of Intuniv and some other medications that he takes for some other things that we'll talk about at a different time. But Nehemiah really, even with the highest doses of medications that he still has a lot of symptoms associated with ADHD. So it can be very hard to manage and deal with. And he needs a lot of encouragement. He needs prompting. He needs rewards and motivation to do things that he doesn't want to do. And he just really needs a lot more adults to just say, hey, you're a really smart kid. You can do this. Let's get this done. And to help him do well. Most of you that have followed me know that I've been in a fight with the school. Still am. Nehemiah deserves to do well in school. So I appreciate you guys and thank you for continuing to help me and support me in that. Next thing. Real life stories. So my phone is frozen, but it looks like it's still working on StreamYard. So I'm just going to keep going, but I have to look to the right to read the slide. So I'm sorry about that. Or maybe I don't know. But one night when Nehemiah was 3 years old, he got up in the middle of the night, went to the bathroom, turned on the water in the sink, plugged the sink, played in the water for a few minutes, then went back to bed, leaving the water running. I woke up to my house being flooded. Not fun times. Thankfully, we cleaned it up and we had the dryer, the fans in there and cleaned the carpet and everything. But man, that was a mess. And he was only 3 years old. When he was 7 years old, he was angry and destroyed a shoe rack, slashed inflatable toys, and cut the wires to our security cameras. Again, that impulsivity, the lashing out and not really thinking about what you're doing. That was several $100s worth of electronic equipment that had to be replaced. We were not happy. I think Nehemiah learned a valuable lesson that day in what he did with that. More recently, Nehemiah blurted out, "What is an STD?" while we were filming live a birthday party for his brother. So that's just an example of the impulsivity and blurting out inappropriate things. Hold on. And how do you treat it? Nehemiah is on a combination of medications that helps him focus and lowers his hyperactivity. It slows his brain down a little bit so he can better focus. Nehemiah had to spend a few days in the hospital to work out the right combination to help him. We continue to see a doctor to make sure his treatment is working, and he goes to counseling. And for a short time, he was in behavior therapy, which I mentioned earlier was the ABA therapy. We have a 504, which allows for accommodations in a school setting to also offset the difficulties he has so that his true understanding is reflected in his grade, which that's not happening at the moment. So that's how it should work. It should help. The accommodations should help Nehemiah perform at the level of his peers if they're followed correctly. We use motivation systems, prompts, and reminders to keep him on task. Due to the rapid changes in what he likes and wants, motivators can be difficult to find and they need to be changed often. It's a constant battle, and we work on behaviors as they come up. So it's something that we work with on a regular basis. As things happen, we move on and go, whatever comes up. If we need to go back to the site and have a medication change, if we need to do a different type of therapy, if we need to address something with the counselor, if we need to address something with the school, it's a work in progress. And we want to continue to teach Nehemiah more and more skills on how to manage the things that he has difficulty with. So the difficulty with the maintaining on-task behaviors, doing long-term projects, which I have some great ideas to help him with that. And I really wish that the school systems had classes for kids to learn time management, to learn how to use a planner and appropriately plan things, how to teach. I wish they would teach, like, what's the word for it? Leadership skills, and prepare kids for the real world. That makes sense. And there are some places that do. I just haven't had that available to any of my kids at this point. There is a great book on ADHD and executive functioning skills, which is a huge difficulty for kids with ADHD. And it had a whole program in there on teaching skills on how to use a planner, how to take notes, how to stay more organized. And all of my kids could really benefit from it. Anyway, I'm just rambling on. On to the next one. So this is important because I've run into this lately. So what ADHD is not. ADHD is not just bad behavior or a kid misbehaving. ADHD is not just being a boy. And I will get into some statistics in a little bit, but boys are more likely to have ADHD than girls. It's just they just have a higher percentage of it, but there are girls with ADHD, so boy or girl. ADHD is not just a child that needs discipline. ADHD is not an excuse for taking stimulants. ADHD is not just an excuse to do bad things, and ADHD is not immaturity. I say these things for specific reasons. And I didn't really go over the stimulants earlier. Stimulants are used to treat ADHD because the part of the brain that reacts and acts is faster than your critical thinking part of your brain. So ADHD drug medications, the stimulants, they stimulate that part of the brain to help speed up your frontal lobe, essentially, to make better decisions before you act them on those decisions or those thoughts that you have. So on to the next slide. ADHD is. So what is ADHD? ADHD is a real medical diagnosis with specific criteria for diagnosis. It is not something that parents just say, my kid's hyper, so they have ADHD. ADHD is a true diagnosis that has to be diagnosed by a medical professional that has specific standards that have to be gone through, and they're in the DSM-5. You can look them up and see what are the requirements, and then all the different types of ADHD and how they diagnose them is in the DSM-5. ADHD is a real struggle for those who have it. ADHD is able to be treated with medication, such as stimulants, with a good success rate. And ADHD is a real disability that needs accommodations in a school and work setting, which is an interesting thought. So what can you do? Be understanding and helpful to those with ADHD. Follow the accommodations set forth in treatment plans and spread awareness. Talk to Nehemiah about his struggles and how you can help him, and fight for the rights of those who struggle with ADHD in work and school environments. And that's what I'd like to do. I want to bring awareness to this. I want to be able to help other people who are struggling. Now I'm going to pull up another screen here. So let's pull up another screen here. And I'm running out of time because all of my kids are home right now. And I'm just going to scroll through these. I would ask that you look at these resources after this video. So here we go. Data and statistics about ADHD. This is something that I found interesting. There's a whole lot of information on this website. This is the cdc.gov /ncbddd/ADHD/data.html. You can, I'm only pulling up the data and statistic form, but you can see on the side there's a lot more information here on ADHD. But I just wanted to point out that a large amount of people have, a large amount of children have ADHD. And this one says 6.1 million, or 9.4%. And then they give the ages there. Nehemiah would be in the 12 to 17 years of age, or 3.3 million children in that age range. The very bottom, I mentioned this earlier, boys are more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD than girls, 12.9% compared to 5.6%. So just wanted to point that out to you. There are some other statistics on here that having other disorders, which that's not my focus today, but a lot of kids with ADHD are diagnosed with other disorders, which Nehemiah is included, but I will cover those in other broadcasts. And then services with ADHD, Nehemiah does get multi-approach treatment. So it's not just medication and not just counseling therapy. He gets both. And I did mention that earlier. So this is a great website to go through. It has a tab for diagnosis and treatment and a lot more information. So check out the CDC, very good website. And I'm going to end this one and share another one. So let's stop screen share that one and let's share one more for you guys. This is the National Library of Medicine, or the NLM. So this is pubmed.ncbi.nih.gov/1726148/. That's where you can find this website. This is academic and educational outcomes for children with ADHD. This is a study that was done. It is very interesting. There are a lot of resources on here and other articles and things like that. And you'd have to click through and read all the different things in this study. But essentially, children who have ADHD are more than twice as likely than the average child to drop out of high school. So I don't remember the statistics specifically. I think it was about, let me go ahead and end this. I think on average, I think it's 13% of the average, no, 15% of all students drop out of high school. For kids with ADHD, is 38%. So it's more than double. And that's because they have to work so much harder and they really struggle with performing. And it's easy to give up. That's that lack of motivation. And they just don't want to do it anymore. So I hope you enjoyed this little bit long but brief explanation of ADHD and Nehemiah. Nehemiah also did his own video on ADHD, and you can hear it from his perspective. As I stated, I'd like to do more information, maybe go through some of these studies with you and pull out true statistics and scientific data, maybe even go through the DSM-5 and the criteria for diagnosis, and maybe even have a professional that works with kids with ADHD on here to talk about it. We can maybe ask questions in a live session. So thank you so much for watching. Please share this video out and help us bring awareness. And I look forward to talking to you guys next time. Bye, everybody.